It's good to be here. I'm joining from San Francisco, so I appreciate you guys having me here remotely. And I will tell you a little bit about CrowdMed. Everyone hears me okay? All right, fantastic. I'm the founder of CrowdMed, and to start with just our mission, which is to harness the wisdom of crowds to solve the world's most difficult medical cases online. And my inspiration to start CrowdMed was actually my little sister, Carly. So at the age of 18, without any warning or apparent cause, she fell into a deep depression. And she had to drop out of college. She would sleep 14 hours a day. She was too fatigued when she was awake to do anything but watch TV. She gained 50 pounds of weight and woke up several times a night with nightmares, soaked in a cold sweat. And it got so bad that eventually suicidal thoughts entered her mind. And as many of you who have either personally or through a family member struggled with a difficult to diagnose medical condition, like POTS, for example, over the next several years, my parents brought Carly to 16 different medical specialists. And she racked up six-figure medical bills, just desperately seeking a diagnosis. And each of her doctors would treat her symptoms as best they could, but none could really identify the root cause of her illness. And we later discovered that she had a rare disease that affects just 1 in 15,000 females. So most of her doctors had never heard of this disease before, much less seen it. And it wasn't until she was seen by an interdisciplinary team of physicians at the highly selective NIH Undiagnosed Disease Program in Bethesda, Maryland, that she finally discovered her correct diagnosis and treatment plan. And the problem with our medical culture today is what I call the doctor house paradigm, which is this notion that any medical mystery can be solved by a lone genius working in isolation, if only we can find them. And it's this paternalistic paradigm that gives us great comfort emotionally, but it's simply not true. The truth is that no doctor, no matter how brilliant they are, can keep up with the vast amount of medical knowledge that exists today. So unfortunately, Dr. House is a fictional character. However, there's a phenomenon called the wisdom of crowds. It shows that large and intellectually diverse crowds tend to be much smarter than even the smartest individual experts in the world, so long as there's the right mechanism in place to aggregate their collective intelligence. And we developed CrowdMed to be the optimal mechanism for crowding medical answers. So using an early prototype of what eventually became CrowdMed, we tried to retroactively crowdsource the answer to my sister's case, using 100 randomly selected people, showing them the exact same information that her doctors had before she was diagnosed. And much to her even own surprise, the crowd correctly identified her correct diagnosis in just a few days at a negligible cost. And that's really when I devoted myself full-time to founding the company.
Jared? Pardon me, Jared. Would you be able to hit the park button on the double?
Yep, I parked it.
Thank you.
Okay. So on this next slide, you'll see some statistics about some of our success to date. And we're very proud of the fact that now, 2 years later, this product that Carly inspired has helped solve hundreds of difficult medical cases for patients like her. So to give you an idea of how powerful the platform has proven so far, to date, we've resolved over 1,000 real-world medical mysteries on the site. And the average patient on our site had already been sick for 7 years. They'd already seen 8 doctors, and they'd already incurred over $70,000 in medical expenses. They'd also spent an average, this isn't on the slide, but they'd also spent an average of almost 400 hours researching their case online before submitting it. So despite the incredible difficulty of these cases, over 60% of these patients tell us that CrowdMed successfully led them closer to either a correct diagnosis or cure. And about half of them say that their CrowdMed diagnosis was eventually confirmed to be correct by their physician. So all of this for an average cost to the patient of under $300 in less than 2 months, and using an average of 22 volunteer case solvers from around the world. So to say it differently, our our crowdsourcing approach provides nearly 3 times as many medical opinions, about 200 times less expensively, and about 40 times more quickly than the traditional medical system had to date, helping to solve the majority of cases that the medical system really had not. And to kind of put this in context for you, I mentioned that my sister was diagnosed at that prestigious NIH undiagnosed disease program at Bethesda. And that NIH program, which is pretty much considered the gold standard for a brick and mortar a place to go for undiagnosed patients, they get about 500 applications a year and accept about 115 patients a year. And they have a $5.6 million. We resolve many times as many cases as they do, about 6 times as many cases per month, and at about 1/60th the cost per case. And what's cool is we're now starting to get a lot of recognition within the mainstream medical community. So there's actually a group of well-known medical researchers from Stanford and Baylor that wrote an article about our results to date, which has been submitted for review and possible publication in a major medical journal. I was invited to give talks on CrowdMed's success to date at the Rock Health Innovation Summit and the Personalized Medicine World Conference. And I even gave a TED Talk at TEDMed last year with the video soon to be released online. So it's great to see us getting the recognition that that I think is deserved within the mainstream medical community. And to go back to the previous slide for a second, I want to point out here that while payers in the medical system enjoy enormous economic value, thanks to the platform we built, patients get enormous human value. So nearly half of our patients consider their CrowdMed results much better than the traditional medical system, and almost none of them consider it any worse at all than what they had in the traditional medical system. And bear in mind that these are literally the world's most difficult medical cases, and we're doing all of this for a tiny sliver of the cost of what they could of what the medical system provides. And whenever I talk about kind of our ROI and all these metrics, I want to point out that even though these numbers tell an amazing story, what's really amazing is the hundreds of success stories and notes of thanks that we collected from patients, with more coming in literally every week. And many of these stories will bring tears to your eyes. I've got just in the deck a couple of examples here. I believe Lauren's providing all of these slides on a USB stick, so you can read these offline if you'd like. But these patients, all of them have experienced personal struggles just as difficult as my sister's. So the human impact that we're having on these patients' lives is really gratifying to me. I mean, we're truly saving and improving lives every day. Another success story, which I'll skip through. And now I'm going to kind of walk through the patient experience to kind of illustrate how this works for patients. So kind of taking it one step at a time. So the first thing patients do is complete an online patient questionnaire. And here we ask about things like their symptoms, their medical history, their family medical history, any medications they're on, their diet, many other medical details. And of course, all of this can be done completely anonymously. We never ask for the patient's real name. Patients are known simply by a pseudonym that they select on the site. Next, the patient can upload medical records, images, any test results that might be relevant to their case. And also, to maintain anonymity here, we encourage patients to remove any personally identifiable information from their uploaded materials. And we even provide them with software tools so they can easily do so. And then we use those patient questionnaire responses and uploaded material to automatically generate the patient's case on our site. So once the case goes live, our patented prediction market technology starts to go into play. And I'll kind of explain then how it works from the medical detective side. So we start collecting and filtering diagnostic and solution suggestions from our case solvers from around the world. And we call them, again, medical detectives. And I'll give more detail later on who they are. And our system includes sophisticated point betting and community moderation features to really help identify and remove the bad suggestions while ensuring that the good suggestions rise to the top. And meanwhile, while our system is assigning these accurate probabilities to all the diagnoses and collecting chat, we also encourage a lot of discussion and debate amongst our medical detectives. So, for feature, the medical detectives can discuss potential diagnoses and solutions with each other and with the patient, and really debate why they think a certain answer might be right or wrong. So basically on our site, nothing happens behind closed doors, and patients are really involved in every step of the process. So finally, after about usually 60 to 90 days on our site, the patient gets their final results report, which is a nice PDF format report that we send, which summarizes the results. And it's something the patient can then bring to their doctor and say, hey, doc, here's the consensus opinion of 20 different medical experts from around the world, from all different disciplines, who collaborated on my case and think that this is most likely the correct diagnosis or solution for my case. And they back it up with research articles and publications and really try to really back up these suggestions so the doctor can understand why the community came to those conclusions. And all of this, of course, happens without any manual intervention from anyone on my staff. So from our standpoint, this is 100% automated from start to finish. We provide the technology platform, but it's really our medical detective community that does all the heavy lifting here and thinking. And perhaps if there's time, Lauren can tell you a little bit about her experience. She actually submitted her case on CrowdMed as kind of a validation exercise. And maybe she can tell you a little bit offline about, or once I finish, about what happened with her experience on the site. So that's just briefly kind of how our process works. But now I want to speak a little bit about how we fit into the digital health landscape. So most digital health products out there, they're kind of in the lower left portion of this quadrant. And they exist to help patients with common conditions to avoid a trip to the doctor's office. And really the reason why is, if you're relying on one person's opinion, it's much easier to answer these kind of everyday questions or solve these everyday kind of cases than the complicated chronic cases that are submitted on our site every day. So for example, Teladoc and HealthTap, also out here in Silicon Valley, they charge patients between $49 and $99 a month, and that allows a patient to text or video chat with one doctor, usually a primary care physician. On the other end of the spectrum, you have companies like Grand Rounds that charge many thousands of dollars for a patient to send their case to a top physician and get his or her individual opinion on it. But by contrast, CrowdMed patients pay us anywhere between $99 and $2 a month for just 2 or 3 months. And in exchange, they get the consensus opinion of an average of more than 20 medical experts, and really a better than 60% chance of their case eventually getting closer to a correct diagnosis or cure as a result. So we think our value proposition is much stronger. And what it boils down to is our competitors have to choose between either answering these simple medical questions inexpensively or charging many thousands of dollars to get one expert's opinion on a difficult case. But because we spent many years developing and refining this crowdsourcing approach, and because we have the unique incentive structure and all these innovative filtering mechanisms, we can really crowdsource answers to complicated cases like my sister's, both quickly and inexpensively, which is why we kind of stand alone in the upper left portion of this quadrant. So let's talk briefly about how patients find us. People often ask me, how do people find us? We have a Facebook page with almost 30,000 likes on it. We have 1,000 Twitter followers. We have a referral program. We get a few cases from that as well. We've had a ton of PR, over 100 major media hits to date, publications including the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Reuters, Bloomberg, Economist. I've been on TV several times talking about CrowdMed. Also SEO. If you go to Google, or it's called search engine optimization, if you go to Google and you type in solve medical case or difficult medical cases, we're the first result that comes up. If you search for anything related to crowdsourced medicine or crowdsourced medical diagnoses, we're the first thing that comes up. We also have an ambassador program where we have 12 medical students at different top universities on campus representing us to recruit their peers. A few statistics here on our patients. People often ask me, who are these patients that we're helping? And really the one thing they have in common is how different they are from each other. So on this top chart here, I'm not sure if you can read it, but it shows our final diagnoses by frequency. And it's a very colorful chart because there isn't really one or two diagnoses that we specialize in. In fact, no single diagnosis has been more than 2% of our total. And 95% of our diagnoses have come up only once or twice ever in the history of our site. So this is really a long tail phenomenon where we're solving cases, a wide variety of cases that doctors have failed to. And if you can read here, a lot of autonomic disorders are in kind of our top 10 though. So I think that's one of the reasons that Lauren wanted me here is we have helped a lot of patients with POTS and related illnesses, even though, again, there's no single trend to types of illnesses that we diagnose. In terms of age, our patients really cover the gamut from newborn babies to 99-year-olds. But really, even though the average age is in the 40s, they tend to be either young children, often with a genetic disorder, or perhaps baby boomers that have been suffering for many years with some unsolved medical mystery. Also, most of our patients are in the U.S. So we have patients from over 25 different countries, and they skew a little bit female. So another question I'm commonly asked is, who are our medical detectives? So let's talk a little bit about them. And to give you an idea of scale here, we've had about 1,000 medical detectives who have logged in the past few months, about 400 that are actively solving cases on the platform right now. And most of them either work in or study medicine. So most commonly, either doctors, nurses, or med students. But we also have allied health professionals, medical researchers, scientists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, nutritionists. And importantly, a minority of our patients are their patients. Excuse me, a minority of our medical detectives are their patients. And we've seen that often, and you guys probably know this as well as anyone, often patients who've had a particular disease know more about it than the vast majority of doctors do out there. So we really want to capture their insights. Yes.
I think we should probably move on to Q&A now. And I also wanted to share my CrowdMed experience, if that's cool.
Okay, sure. Absolutely. We can cut it off here. I covered the most important things.
Okay. So the way I actually met Jared is I had heard about CrowdMed from someone, and I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting. I had, like many of you, an awful time getting diagnosed. It took me 2 years and $80,000 in co-pays, who knows what my insurance company had to pay, for me to find out that I had POTS secondary to an autoimmune disease known as Sjogren's syndrome. And I thought, well, I had this 2-year misdiagnosis, misadventure. Let me see if CrowdMed can figure me out. And so I put my case on there, not from the perspective of a well-informed diagnosed patient, but from the perspective I had, 3 to 4 months into my POTS illness, where I was panicked and confused and so sick and getting bounced around to specialists left and right and had no answers. So I put my symptoms up the way that I used to describe them, and I didn't use any buzzwords that POTS patients might know about, And within 24 hours, someone on CrowdMed said, I think you have POTS. Here's the Vanderbilt website. They're the best for this. And I was like, oh my God, someone figured me out in 24 hours. Could you imagine if I had found, I don't know if CrowdMed existed when I first got sick with POTS, but just how cool is that someone, and the person who made the diagnostic suggestion, their screen name, a lot of people use like nicknames. It was Zebras Are Real. And I'm going, oh, that has to be a patient, And then, so I didn't say like, oh yes, I have POTS. I kind of like let it go to see like if other detectives would chime in with suggestions. And they did. A few of them suggested dysautonomia. Somebody suggested EDS, which I don't have, but they were thinking in the dysautonomia land when they suggested EDS. And then a person came on, and it was pretty clear it was an experienced physician because they gave me a suggestion for a diagnostic workup that is exactly what Dr. Shamali did at Cleveland Clinic. And I was like, I wonder if this is like a neuroimmunologist or an autonomic neurologist that's making the suggestion. They said, you have to get tested for, in my particular case, I had known small fiber neuropathy, so I did put that as one of my symptoms that I knew I had. And so the person said, you need a full small fiber neuropathy workup, and they went through all these things, and they said, and Sjogren's, and you have to get tested for Sjogren's, and don't just get the blood test, you have to get the lip biopsy too. And that was the key to my diagnosis. I had earlier on, I had some doctors do blood tests for Sjogren's, and they were normal. So they told me I didn't have Sjogren's. Unfortunately, about 40% of Sjogren's patients don't have the Sjogren's antibodies that are commonly tested, and I had to get diagnosed with a lip biopsy. So anyways, I got this recommendation on CrowdMed. The first day, somebody suggested POTS, and within 5 days, someone who was clearly a very experienced physician said, you have to get tested for Sjogren's with a lip biopsy. So I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have to talk to this company. So I emailed them, and Jared got in touch eventually, and I think this is so cool. So many of our POTS patients and other dysautonomia patients are trying to find their root cause or comorbid conditions, EDS or MITO issues, all kinds of different things. So I just think it might be a tool that our patient community could use to get some guidance. You know, you can't be formally diagnosed conclusively over the internet, but maybe you could get some suggestions that you could bring to your doctors to get a more thorough workup targeting your particular issues. So that's my story, and I think CrowdMed is super cool. Do we want to do some Q&A?
You have a range of, I think you said $99 to $249. What creates that range?
What's the differences between our different packages? Is that the question?
Is it packages?
Yes. So we have 3 different packages, and in fact, I might have a slide here about them. I believe you see it on the screen. So there's the light package, which is $99 a month, and that includes, basically they differ in terms of how we limit who can participate in the case. So in our light package, anyone on the platform can participate without limitation, and also there's no financial incentive for participants. Whereas the standard package limits participation to our top 15% of medical detectives. I should say limits full participation to our top 15%. The premium package limits it to our top 5%. And also the standard package includes $100 in compensation that goes to the medical detectives who perform best on the case. And the premium package includes $200 in compensation that goes to the medical detectives who perform best. So basically provides an incentive for kind of our best and brightest detectives to participate in that case.
Hi. Just more of a comment than a question. I was the one in the migraine session yesterday who has a 19-year-old daughter who has chronic migraine, and it's every day. And we struggle with it constantly. She's had POTS and chronic migraine for 6 years, and we've tried everything. And I had her neurologist we go to a top facility, and I made the comment I would like for her to be tested for EDS and for Sjogren's, and he said, well, I don't know. And then he finally agreed, and I said, good, leave no stone left unturned. Well, he actually got angry with me over that statement, and he says, well, you're turning your daughter into a medical experiment. So it's just a constant frustration, and I don't know if other people have had that, but there is a balance between, looking for root causes and actually being fine with your diagnosis and going forward with that. And I just wanted to get the opinions from the experts and maybe some parents as to where do you say, okay, we're comfortable with our diagnosis and we're not going to go any further from here. Thank you.
I think that's a really a big, important question for a lot of people that doesn't have an easy answer. I know in my own case, I had doctors who were really good doctors who had my best interests in mind, who told me, you're on a wild goose chase and you're driving yourself into a hole by keep going to so many doctors. And I knew that, I knew that was a possibility, that I could just be spinning my wheels and getting nowhere. But in my own particular case, because we knew I had small fiber neuropathy, I thought it's really unfair to give someone an idiopathic label when you haven't turned over every stone looking at the cause. I was particularly on a mission to find things that could cause small fiber neuropathy. I wanted to just rule them out one by one. And if we could never find a cause, then we could never find a cause, and I would move on after I thought I had enough testing to look for it. But for all of us, you have to strike a balance between moving on, accepting that you have some kind of difficult to manage illness that might not be going away tomorrow, and living your life as well as you can and accepting, but at the same time, kind of always keeping an eye out for new ideas. I certainly think that anyone who's seeing a lot of POTS patients should be skilled enough to screen them for EDS, particularly EDS 3, which is fairly easy to do an office exam. And if they need to be worked up for other types of EDS, they usually have to see a geneticist. But and Sjogren's, there's not a lot of proof that it happens in a lot of POTS patients. There's some interesting antibodies research going on, but I think that a lot of doctors are reluctant to certainly reluctant to do lip biopsies because it is invasive and it leaves sometimes a little numb. I had a numb spot for like a year. I couldn't feel when I was putting my lipstick on. But especially in younger patients, that's usually less common in young people, but it can occur in young people. So I'm not one to ever tell someone don't go look for your cause, because if I didn't, I probably would still be bedridden and there would be no Dysautonomia International, So I'm serious. We started this organization in part because I felt like after I got better, I felt like I wanted to help other people get to that same place, And everybody's got a different path. So, but you have to strike a balance. I don't think you can go. It's probably not a good thing to bounce around to hundreds of medical centers all over the place. But do you have any comments here, Dr. Boles?
One of the problems is the word diagnosis. It sounds so final, but the vast majority of what are considered diagnoses, not just by patients, but by physicians, are actually descriptions. POTS is a description. It's not really a real cause. There's probably many different causes for POTS. Migraine is a description. Chronic fatigue is a description. All of these diagnoses are descriptions. They're not the actual cause or factors involved. So if you have an actual cause or factor and it's proven and you've gone to an expert, then that may be the end of the road. But if you just have a descriptive term, that's really just a description. I mean, the vast majority, if you go into the doctor and you say that you have ringing in your ears, and they'll say, oh, well, you have tinnitus, which in Latin just means ringing in the ears, right? But you can charge more for tinnitus than you can for ringing in the ears. I mean, so be careful on that, particularly if you have several descriptions. And there's probably a lot of people in the audience that they may have POTS, they may have irritable bowel, they may have chronic fatigue, they may have migraine, they may have fibromyalgia. Certainly, almost nobody has all of those, although I do have patients that have all of those and more. Some patients have as many as 20 different diagnoses, but they're really just descriptions.
This question is for Jared. When you are reviewing a patient's medical records that they've uploaded, does CrowdMed ever or encourage or request additional test results, blood results, scans, or do you make the diagnoses based on what has been submitted?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll show you guys a screenshot. We have a chat feature, and you'll see it here on the right, assuming my slides are still up. Basically, there's a lot of Q&A or back and forth that goes on between our medical detectives and the patient. So most of the time, the medical detectives don't have everything they need from the initial case submission. They might say, hey, can you upload this diagnostic test result? Or can you have this test run and get back to us with the results? Or have you and your doctor considered or ruled out this particular diagnosis? And there's a lot of chat, a lot of back and forth that goes on between the medical detectives and the patient. And we make all of that correspondence visible in real time to everyone on the site. So if a half dozen different detectives are chatting with the patient, the other detectives in that case can also see that correspondence, so they don't ask the same question twice. And often a question they would have asked had already been asked, and they can just look at the chat history and see the answer. But there's a lot of that back and forth.
So I have another question for Jared. I think a frustration that a lot of us have had who have been to a large number of medical centers is a lack of consistency in what we hear. So-called experts might say something one day and then the complete opposite in another center. And so I have a question about on your website, how do you build consensus? I see this as being 20 plus experts who believe very strongly in one thing, and then someone else believes something differently. And so what would prevent us to be in the same position where we see 5 different differing opinions on the site without getting kind of a consensus opinion?
Sure. And that's a great question. And we definitely see that phenomenon on our site where different medical detectives might have very different opinions. So there's a couple things we do there. The first is our discussion feature. So you'll see on the right here, when you see one doctor working in isolation, there's no one to call him out or her out on something that he or she says that they might disagree with. So that person has the floor, and there's no one to question them or debate with them why something's right or wrong, other than the patient, who often has to be very empowered to be able to have those conversations. So first of all, on our site, we encourage a lot of discourse, a lot of conversation. If one person suggests something and someone else thinks it's wrong, they can explain why. And the person who suggested it has to support it and say, no, here's why I think it's right. And we think that the truth or the best answers emerge through argument and debate and discourse, which doesn't often happen if you're just listening to one doctor in isolation. The second thing I'll mention is, because we don't want to just create argument without reaching any conclusions, we also have features to kind of measure a level of consensus amongst the medical detectives to the extent that can be gathered. So we have this patented prediction market technology. And the way it works is every diagnosis, how much support it has within the community is measured by point betting behavior. So medical detectives can bet or allocate points to the suggestions that they think are best, and we can look at their aggregate point betting behavior to assign probabilities to each diagnosis. So after all this debate and discourse takes place, medical detectives can kind of place a final bet and say, all right, well, looking at everything in this case, I think that I'm going to allocate 100 points to this diagnosis and 50 points to that one and 25 points to that one. And then we look at how they allocated points in aggregate and put it through our prediction market algorithm to assign a probability to each one based on, more or less their consensus opinion.
I have a question that I actually wanted to ask Dr. Boles. In terms of the Courtagen testing, do patients have a hard time getting insurance to cover it? And if they do, does your company handle that? Like, do you have somebody that can help them appeal and get the insurance coverage?
The company does have representatives at work with the insurance companies. If you have PPO insurance, the track record is really good. I can get most of my patients PPO through the lab. I don't get any advantages on this when I send my own patients through there. In fact, it's a disadvantage because of the conflict of interest. I have to get another physician to order the test. HMOs, they work, they fight with you, they have letters and things like that. One of the things that we do is to limit your costs. The testing is extremely expensive, and nobody wants to get stuck with a $10,000 bill. So you sign a contract at the beginning saying that you will only owe $100 and you pay $100. Regardless of the insurance company completely stiffs the company, you still owe only exactly $100. The vast majority of families owe $50 or $100. Yes, the next seminar will go over this more in detail. I'm going to talk a lot about dysautonomia. All of those patients that I mentioned up there, they all have dysautonomia. Okay, it's just that I focused on a different symptom for each one, which is their major symptom, but they all have many different symptoms. They all have dysautonomia. But yeah, dysautonomia, over 50% of my patients with dysautonomia that have done the testing have found an answer that they're much better because of that. It doesn't diagnose everybody, and some people we diagnose we don't know what to do with, but it's a very good track record. There is a Courtagen booth here. that's over there in the corner there, if you want to talk to. He's been kind of all alone because I'm talking here on the last day. So.
Harrison has someone with another question. The mic.
My question is for Jared. I'm one of the moms that were told to stop doctor shopping, searching for diagnosis, where my response was, I'll stop searching when I'm dead. But if your detectives want more testing done, how do you go back to a doctor like that may be offended that I'm asking, as a parent, to have more testing done?
Sure. And I'll say that we rely on patients, first of all, to really be their own advocates, because some doctors, they see a suggestion from CrowdMed to get a certain test run or to maybe consider a diagnosis they hadn't yet considered. And they're like, this is just something else from the internet. And I don't trust anything the patient brings in from the internet. And the patient has to convince their physician that this is not just something they came up with on their own. Someone who really knows what they're talking about has suggested this and provided reasons why this test should be run. And ultimately, though, the patient has to convince the physician to have it run, and because the patient's real physician, the physician they see in person, is ultimately the one who's kind of in charge. But the patient has to, again, be their own advocate there.
Be another physician as well. I mean, if a physician is giving you a lot of grief and saying that they don't want to do any more testing or anything, I mean, maybe that's not the right doctor for you.
That's a great point as well.
This question is for you. My wife and daughter were very fortunate. Years ago, they went out and visited you in California, and you gave them great direction, great suggestions, so thank you. I see that Courtagen is based in Woburn, Massachusetts, and I was wondering, do you come to Woburn at all, or the East Coast? My son could not make that visit years ago, and I was just curious if you come back here.
I only have a medical license in California, sorry, and I only see one new patient a month, so I'm very, very picky on because of that. I try to keep in medicine so I keep relevant, but I'm trying to give my all to the sequencing and to the research of what we're finding so that I can help more people that way, so it's a trade-off.
I think we should probably close out the questions now. Does anybody have one last question? Okay. Well, I want to thank the speakers for our time. I hope that you guys have learned. One of the things I think we need to do as patients is look outside of the normal, doctor-patient relationship, which is still very, very important, and you want to have the best doctor on your team as possible. But I think you, as a patient or as a parent, need to sometimes get creative and think of other ways that you can help advocate for yourself or your patient. And I think, genetic testing is one way you could go, and I think CrowdMed is pretty cool too. So I'm just, I wanted to share these ideas with our patient population because I really think we have to advocate for ourselves. No one cares about even if you have a great doctor, no one cares about your illness more than you do and getting better more than you do.